It was July 1518. The setting was Strasbourg, a free city within the Holy Roman Empire. Early in the morning, just as the citizens were beginning to stir from their sleep, a deeply unsettling event began to unfold. A common woman named Frau Troffea stepped out of her modest home and onto the narrow cobblestone street. There was no music playing, no festival in town, and absolutely no reason for celebration. Yet, driven by an invisible, inexplicable urge, Frau Troffea began to dance. At first, her neighbors smiled, assuming it was a sudden burst of eccentric merriment, or perhaps a private jest, but the smiles quickly faded from their faces as they looked closer. There was no joy in Troffea's eyes. Instead, her face was a mask of pure agony, her eyes wide with terror, drenched in sweat. It looked as though an invisible, sadistic puppeteer was violently pulling her limbs, and she had completely lost control of her own body. Hour after hour bled away. Afternoon dissolved into evening, but Troffea did not stop. Her shoes wore through, and the rough stones began to tear at her feet, leaving crimson streaks on the cobblestones. Yet she kept moving with a frantic, unnatural energy. Her husband and friends desperately tried to hold her down, but she broke free with an eerie strength, her limbs continuing their violent twitching even while restrained. When she finally collapsed from sheer exhaustion after nearly 2 days, everyone thought the nightmare was over. But hours later, upon waking, she immediately resumed her grotesque ballet. The townspeople watched in a mixture of awe and growing dread. In the 16th century, this was not viewed as a medical anomaly. It was seen as a terrifying curse. Little did they know, this was only the beginning of an epidemic that would soon turn their city into a living hell. Frau Troffea's bizarre dance acted like a highly contagious, invisible virus floating through the heavy summer air of Strasbourg. Within a week, the madness began to catch others, one by one. A young girl, watching from a doorstep, suddenly froze. Her feet began to tap violently, her hips swayed, and a moment later, she was pulled into the street, joining Troffea's relentless rhythm. By the end of the week, more than 30 citizens had forsaken their shops, their children, and their sanity to join the line. The alleyways of Strasbourg were no longer filled with the sounds of daily life, but the heavy, synchronized thudding of dozens of bare, bleeding feet slamming against the earth. The city authorities, a powerful council of wealthy magistrates and church leaders, realized they were facing a catastrophic crisis. They quickly summoned the finest physicians of the region. After peering through their heavy spectacles and examining the twitching dancers, the doctors came to a startling secular conclusion. They declared that this was not the work of Satan, nor was it a divine miracle. Instead, they diagnosed the afflicted with a natural brain ailment called hot blood. According to the medical wisdom of the era, the only way to cure hot blood was to let it run its course. The patients needed to dance it out. Acting upon this terrible advice, the council made a fatal error. Instead of restraining the dancers, they decided to help them dance with maximum efficiency. They cleared a massive open-air market square and built a grand wooden stage. They went so far as to hire professional drummers and pipers to provide a steady, driving beat, and even paid strongmen to hold the dancers upright when they were on the verge of fainting. They believed this would accelerate the cure, but in reality, they had just poured oil onto a roaring wildfire. The grand wooden stage constructed by the city authorities did not become a place of healing. Instead, it transformed into a carnival of death. The rhythmic, hypnotic pounding of the drums and the shrill cry of the pipes echoed through every corner of Strasbourg. Citizens who had previously felt only a mild twitching in their limbs were drawn to the square by the magnetic, overwhelming atmosphere. They arrived merely to watch, only to find themselves instantly sucked into the swirling vortex of the dancing crowd. By August, the number of dancers had swelled from dozens to over 400. The central square became a scene straight out of a fever dream. Hundreds of men, women, and children danced side by side under the blazing summer sun. Their clothes were shredded, their skin was caked in dust and dried blood, and their eyes were hollow pools of exhaustion, yet they leapt and twirled with a terrifying, demonic energy. But the human body has strict physical limits, and soon the tragedy turned lethal. In the peak of the August heat, the weaker dancers began to drop. Historical records show that during these days, as many as 15 people were dying every single day. Some suffered massive heart attacks as their overworked hearts exploded inside their chests. Others suffered strokes from the immense pressure, while many simply died of sheer dehydration and exhaustion. The most horrific detail was that when a dancer fell dead to the planks, the musicians, bound by city orders, continued to play their upbeat melodies over the corpses. The air in Strasbourg grew foul with the stench of sweat, blood, and decay. The city was gripped by a collective terror, realizing that science had completely failed them. Finally, as the bodies began to pile up, the magistrates realized their horrific mistake. They silenced the musicians, tore down the wooden stage, and banned all public dancing and music throughout Strasbourg. With science having failed so spectacularly, the authorities turned back to religion. They concluded that this was surely a punishment from Saint Vitus, a Christian martyr known to curse sinners with uncontrollable dancing. The afflicted citizens, still groaning and twitching against their will, were rounded up like cattle. Their bleeding feet were forced into heavy red shoes, and they were loaded into carts to be taken to a shrine dedicated to Saint Vitus in a nearby mountain grotto. There, priests prayed over them, splashed them with holy water, and forced them to walk around an altar holding small wax crosses. Surprisingly, whether due to the quiet of the grotto, the psychological relief of religious intervention, or simply because their bodies had reached the absolute end of physical endurance, the dancing began to slow. By early September, the dancing plague of 1518 completely ceased, leaving behind a traumatized city and hundreds of shallow graves. Today, even after 5 centuries, modern scientists and historians look back at this event with profound mystery. One popular theory suggests ergot poisoning, caused by eating rye bread contaminated with a toxic mold that produces chemicals similar to LSD. However, ergotism cuts off blood supply to the limbs, making sustained dancing for days physically impossible. The most widely accepted explanation is far more chilling. It was a mass psychogenic illness, a contagion of the mind. Broken by famine, poverty, and devastating diseases, the people of Strasbourg were living under extreme psychological stress. When Frau Troffea's mind snapped, it triggered a wave of mass hysteria, proving how fragile the human psyche is and how a simple dance can become a march to the grave.